Hi everyone, and welcome back to Sonia's Prep. In this week's video, I'm gonna take you along and share with you how I make my sourdough bread. You guys all seem to love this and my Shabbat prep that I did, and I showed you how I made them, and you all wanted the recipe. So here it is. Don't forget to check out the sourdough starter recipe if you need some help with your starter. Hopefully that'll be a good beginner's guide for you. I started making sourdough after Passover, so just a few months in, and I cannot get enough of it. It's so delicious, so perfect, so crispy. As you can hear, it's just amazing. I can't wait to show you just how I made it. If you enjoy these types of videos on tutorials of how I cook in my kitchen for my family, then please give this video a big thumbs up and consider subscribing if you are new. With all that said, now let's get into the recipe.
To start off, I remove my sourdough starter from the refrigerator. It's usually stored there when I'm not using it. So since I only use it once a week, I keep it there. Today is Wednesday, and that's when I usually bake my sourdough bread. I'm just showing you the texture of it here, and I want you to hear the air bubbles popping. I do have a nice amount of starter here. I'm going to be using most of it for pizza dough, but I'm also going to be sharing with you my sourdough bread tutorial and recipe. So to start off, I take a big bowl, I put in all of my sourdough starter into it so I could measure the weight of it, and I feed it equal parts of flour and water. So as you see here, I have a total of about 440 grams of sourdough starter. I will be zeroing out the scale and adding in 440 grams of flour. I do like to have a mix of bread flour and a little bit of the whole wheat flour. So I'm going to be doing that here. I added in 400 grams of bread flour and 40 grams of whole wheat flour. If you are just creating your starter, then you would probably have a lot less starter to work with, and that is fine. You just do equal feedings for the amount that you have. Once I added in the flour, I added equal parts of water. So again, 440 grams of water, and then I mix everything up. I believe the term for the whisk that I am using here is called a Danish whisk. I will have it linked in the description box below. I just ordered a sourdough starter kit, and it came with it, and it's very convenient. It prevents your hands from getting wet. So once I mixed my sourdough mixture, I'm going to be letting it rise until it's double in size, and that usually takes anywhere between 3 to 6 hours. After 3 hours, my dough has visibly risen and is full of bubbles, and it's nice and jiggly and full of air, and I know that it is ready for me to bake my bread with. Don't forget to reserve a little bit of your starter for your next time that you're going to be using it. Over here, I'm going to put some starter into my container, feed it once again, and place it into the refrigerator for next time. To start, I take a small bowl and I'm going to be adding in 100 grams of the leaven, which is the sourdough starter that we have just fed and that has risen. I'm going to be making 2 loaves here, so you're going to see me do this process 2 times. So into the other bowl, for my other sourdough loaf, I'm going to be doing the exact same thing by adding in 100 grams of the leaven. If you're just making 1 loaf, obviously you would just do this 1 time. I zero out the scale and add in the flour. I use about 450 grams of bread flour in this recipe with 50 grams of the whole wheat flour. Here I'm doing the exact same thing in the other bowl, adding in 450 grams of bread flour and 50 grams of whole wheat flour. I zero out the scale and add in 350 grams of water. Regular lukewarm water is best. I use mine right from the filter. To mix the dough, I use a Danish whisk. I incorporate everything into a shaggy dough, as they say. You're going to see that it's very, very sticky and it's not going to form anything special at this time. I mix each of these loaves in each of their separate bowls and cover it up and let it sit for a little bit until I feel like the dough has rested enough. It usually takes about 10 to 15 minutes. Here I just wanted to show you what it would look like, what the texture is like if you don't have a Danish whisk. It is very sticky and that is quite normal at this stage. And like I said earlier, I cover the bowls with plastic wrap and let it rest for about 10 to 15 minutes. 10 to 15 minutes later, I place the bowl back onto the scale, zero it out, and add in 10 grams of salt. To incorporate the salt well into the dough, I dip my fingers into some water to provide some moisture, and I massage the salt into the dough. You're going to notice that when you're going to be doing this, the dough has become drastically less sticky and much easier to work with. Once all the salt has been incorporated well into the dough, I cover it back up and let it rest for another 10 minutes. So as you can see, there's just a lot of stop and goes with making sourdough bread, but every time you're touching it, you're really touching it for such short amounts of time that it's really not such a big deal. So here, this is my second loaf that I'm making here. I just added in the salt and I'm massaging it in as well. I cover each loaf and let it rest for 10 minutes. After the 10 minutes, I dip my fingers into some water and start doing my stretch and folds. Stretch and folds are basically exactly what they sound. You take a piece of the dough, lift it up, stretch it, and place it over the top and keep doing it all around. And I do that for each of my loaves. I do these in 30-minute increments. So every 30 minutes or so, it's not really like exact. Nothing's gonna happen if you do 45 minutes or even an hour. You just try to do the best as you can. The more stretch and folds you do, the better and more tension you develop in the dough, and the more beautiful your dough will come out. "30 minutes have passed and I'm doing my second stretch and fold here. And if you've seen my Shabbat prep videos when I make my sourdough, I'm not sitting there babysitting these sourdoughs. I just happen to do them as I am doing my Shabbat prep. I'm doing the exact same thing again with my second loaf. I'm doing the stretch and folds and covering these back up, waiting 30 minutes and doing my third and final stretch and fold. Here in the back, you're going to see a very large bowl full of dough. That's the rest of my starter that I fed, and I'm going to be batch cooking some sourdough pizza. But that's for a different video. Comment down below if you want to see a full tutorial on how I make my sourdough pizza dough. I'll be sharing with you a short clip of the pizza dough that I topped with meat and some white dressing that I have. It is completely dairy-free. After doing my 3 stretch and folds in 30-minute increments, I leave the dough on the counter covered for about 6 hours to rise. And I usually do this overnight. I time everything in a way that I set them on the counter, I go to bed, and 6 hours later, I wake up and finish up my sourdough breads. They're so yummy looking already and delicious and fluffy. So both of these have risen beautifully. I'm going to be spilling them out onto the counter and doing a motion where I'm basically bringing the dough together, bringing a lot of tension to the dough and forming it into a ball. I basically tuck my fingers under the dough and pull it towards myself, rotate, and keep doing that until I develop a really nice tension on the surface of the dough. And again, I'm doing the exact same thing with the second loaf. I fold it in on itself and try to gather up the dough nicely into a ball, creating lots of tension. I leave the form dough on my kitchen counter for 10 minutes to rest. I don't even cover them. And after those 10 minutes are up, I reshape them one more time to create even more tension. So you'll see that I'm fluffing out the dough, trying to create a square shape. I do this very gently, not to rip anything. And I fold it into an envelope, they say. Just gather up the dough and fold it over. And once folded, again, cover up all the seams and create as much tension as you can without ripping the dough. Now we're ready to place our form dough into bannetons. Bannetons are these proofing baskets. You do not need to have these. I just got them in the kit that I ordered previously. To prevent my dough from sticking, I place in 2 paper towels and sprinkle on some flour into them. A couple of you guys have commented on my previous videos that rice flour really does help with the sticking, as well as adding in some oil. So I'm going to definitely be trying that the next time I will be making them, and I will keep everyone posted. In place of the bannetons, if you don't have it, you can simply take a bowl and place a towel over it, and that'll be mimicking a banneton. So you don't have to go out and buy one. You can simply use tools that you have in your own home. I sprinkle the flour over the top of each dough to prevent it from sticking to the plastic that I'll be covering each of the bowls with. I place it into the refrigerator for a minimum of 6 hours. I personally do this for much longer. Sometimes I keep it in the fridge for 24 to even 48 hours. This process is called the autolyse. This is where the dough ferments for a long period of time and becomes nice and fluffy. When I'm ready to bake the dough, I take a parchment paper, place it on my table, and flip the sourdough with the bannetons right over the top of it. I remove the paper towels and sprinkle on a little bit more of the flour. This is the time when you can get very creative and score your bread any which way you like. These are just a few of the ways that I like to score my bread. For my second loaf, I do the exact same thing. I remove the plastic from the bannetons, flip the banneton over onto parchment paper, remove the paper towels, sprinkle on additional flour, but this time I felt like it had plenty, so I just started to square my bread, and this is the design that I chose to do this time. I forgot to mention earlier that before I even take my sourdough out of the refrigerator, I do heat up my oven to 500 degrees with my Dutch ovens inside. I usually do this for about 20 minutes before I start taking out my sourdough and scoring it. It just ensures that the Dutch ovens are up to the right temperature. At this point, my Dutch ovens are really nice and hot. The oven is set at 500 degrees. I open up the lid and very carefully place my sourdough inside of it. Please be careful not to burn yourselves while doing this because the Dutch ovens are extremely hot. I covered everything up with the lid again and place it back into the oven at 500 degrees for 25 minutes. Now that 25 minutes have passed, I take the Dutch ovens out of the oven and uncover them. Although they already look very gorgeous, I still need to cook them for an additional 25 minutes. So I place them back into the oven, uncovered this time, for 25 minutes, but I lower the temperature to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. I always like to set my oven timer for a minute or two earlier just so I could take a peek and make sure nothing has burned. And they look completely gorgeous and perfect. I take them out of the Dutch oven and place them on a cooling rack to cool completely. Now, how amazing was that crunch? I cannot wait to make these again.
So that's it for my sourdough tutorial. I hope you guys liked it. I cannot wait to see all of your creations, all of your little sourdough pictures. Don't forget to send them to me and tag me on Instagram. I want to see them. I'm so excited. If you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this.